Hi, everyone. I want to thank you today for joining our webinar on how to troubleshoot poor session performance within your Citrix or VMware Horizon environment. Today, you have myself, Stacy Leidwinger, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Goliath, as well as Yemi Ladyju, who is our Senior Technical Consultant and spends his days working with our customers, helping them through implementations, as well as co-authoring a number of our technical guides. With that, let's get started. But before we jump in too far, I did want to go over a few housekeeping items. You can expect that this webinar will run around 30 to 45 minutes. And I am going to start with a few context-setting slides up front just to really identify what are some of the pains that you are feeling on this call. We know that you have troubleshooting needs or you wouldn't have joined. And so I just want to set a little bit of context on how purpose-built tools can address those pains. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time going through 3 specific customer examples on how they attacked specific pain points with a purpose-built tool for troubleshooting. And we'll actually walk you through that tool so you can see firsthand what the experience was like. We then will leave time for Q&A at the end. We also are happy to answer questions throughout. We love to make these as interactive as possible. So please put any questions you have in the Q&A or chat box that you see within the system, and we will address those. Finally, you will receive a copy of this webinar after it's recorded. So no worries, we will get that out to you. All right, let's jump in. We hear it daily as we talk to organizations. There is constant fire drills addressing end user session and log-on performance challenges within your Citrix and VMware Horizon environments. We hear that Mondays can be a nightmare as you walk in and there's constant influx of complaints, issues, concerns, both from users as well as management. And really that complexity in troubleshooting those issues, it's just not the volume, but the complexity of finding the root cause that can drive all of you crazy on any individual day. And why is that? Well, what we consistently hear, and I suspect you experience, is that with the growth of the hybrid infrastructure, it's really becoming challenging to know where the root cause is. You're moving more workloads to the cloud. You have legacy applications that are required to still be on-premise. And sometimes that interaction and flow of data is not the best. And this is where issues start to happen. Also, we continually hear from organizations, there's a rise of remote workers. Whether they work remote during 9 to 5, or quite frankly, are continuing their workday in the evening, early morning, weekends. People need to have access to their applications, their virtualized desktops, and they need it to be high performing. The minute there's an issue, you bet there's a ticket on your desk. The other thing, and this really starts to drive the complexity, is rarely do I talk to an organization that have all their virtualized apps and desktops with a single vendor. Most of our customers have a mixed environment where they're using, let's say, Citrix XenApp and desktop applications on top of VMware hardware. Or they have a mix of Xen servers with VMware servers at that hypervisor layer. They're also running things in the cloud or on-premise, as I stated. There's been acquisitions ongoing and now have actual virtual desktops, both of Citrix and VMware, that need help. And so with that mixed environment, it's impossible to have a built-in tool that can see everything in that delivery infrastructure layer. And the last piece of this is change is constant. There is constantly new projects coming up, whether it's upgrading Microsoft Windows, upgrading your Citrix or VMware environments. If you're in healthcare, you're upgrading your EHR systems or rolling out new applications within your EHR app. There's constant change. And it never fails. The minute someone hears the word upgrade or new application, users assume, as well as management, that performance will get better. In fact, I've heard numerous times people commit that with the Windows 10 upgrade, performance will get better. There's a number of stats that have been published that performance actually declines natively if you don't fix other things around it. And it's really a lot of those false expectations that start to get us in trouble and thus needing solutions like the one we're going to talk about today. So with all of this complexity, it really drives the need for purpose-built tools that not only enable more quick and effective troubleshooting, but can also help you as IT professionals become more proactive in avoiding end user performance issues from ever occurring. And when we talk about these purpose-built tools, there's really three core values that they must bring. It needs to have embedded intelligence and automation, again, that will proactively prevent and anticipate performance issues before they can ever impact an end user. I have never seen an organization that says, I have too many Citrix or VMware experts on staff. I have no problem addressing all the issues. So in order to respond quickly, identify that root cause, and address it before an end user is impacted, you need that intelligence and automation to augment your team. The second piece is it doesn't matter how proactive you are, issues are going to happen. We have all tried testing and upgrade only to roll it out and something go wrong as soon as you start to get a load balance on it. So for those cases, you need broad and deep metrics that can not only go across your entire delivery infrastructure, that's from where it goes through the network, the actual virtualized app or desktop, the hypervisor layer, any other servers, group policy, profiles, all of that needs to have metrics around it, as well as end user behavior. Actually knowing what that end user is doing on their machine. And is their virtualized desktop competing for bandwidth with an audio file, a large image file, another program that's running in the background? If you're in healthcare, the complexity only gets worse because you also need visibility across all your major EHR applications and how that's impacting. And then finally, what is so critical in these purpose-built tools is that you get historical reports and analytics. And why this is important, these reports, and we're going to show you them in a little bit later on of what's possible, really bridge the gap between what end users are experiencing and what management sees is happening. That allows you to foster data-driven conversations with internal IT teams, other vendors, and end users. In fact, I was talking to a customer yesterday that said they were able to go to their CFO and validate they needed to upgrade their Citrix Zen servers because they were able to prove through these historical reports that anytime anyone hit that server with their virtualized desktop, they experienced a 50% worse user experience than those that were hitting better servers. So it was the justification that these reports brought that allowed them to upgrade their infrastructure. One last context setting slide, and then we'll get into it, is I just want to point out, you joined this webinar, you know that Yemi and I are both from Goliath Technologies, and everything I just spoke about is exactly what we deliver. We leverage with our solution embedded intelligence and automation to proactively anticipate, troubleshoot, and prevent end user performance issues regardless of where the IT workloads or users are located. So we provide that end-to-end visibility across the end user experience, the entire delivery infrastructure, as well as EHR applications if you happen to be in healthcare. We actually have purpose-built modules, and we're going to give one example today around this, where you can really monitor the end user performance as they're using the EHR application and identify root cause of, is it the EHR app that's really slow, which is often the perception, or is the reality that there's something in the infrastructure layer that's impacting that EHR performance? So with that, little bit of context setting, we're going to jump right into some of these troubleshooting scenarios, and I suspect many of you on the phone have experienced this. The first one is with Penn National Insurance, and if you actually go to our YouTube channel, you can hear them themselves talk about this very challenge we're going to walk through. But they have 12 different office locations and over 8,000 users. Many are remote. Their infrastructure is around the Citrix Zen desktop. They have Agile endpoints, VMware vSphere, and then for their soft phone, they use Cisco IP Communicator. And so when they came to us, they said, look, we're rolling out this new virtual workspace. It's extremely strategic to our management team because we have to have centralized control and management of our desktops for our virtual workers. So this initiative can't fail. But the challenge is we've also included iGel in it. And the minute we started to roll it out for our end users with iGel, users started to complain about poor performance. Their session performance was degrading. When we look at what Penn National told us is when we look at our iGel deployment, there's nothing wrong with it. We don't see any issues on why it would impact performance. Now we're at risk of this entire project failing. Can you help us? So we went ahead. We're easy to get up and implemented. And what we were able to see is actually, or what Penn National was able to see as they started to diagnose home office issues, the problem was not with iGel. It was not with the infrastructure layer. It was really around user behavior. So as a user called in complaining, they actually saw that the session performance was being impacted by competing bandwidth issues across their network. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it to Yemi, who's going to talk to that specifically how they troubleshoot that issue, how they were able to prove that it was not iGel, it was not Citrix, and ultimately solve the issue so they could improve that performance over time. Yemi, do you want to jump in here?
Thank you very much, Stacy. So let's jump right into this particular troubleshooting scenario. So in this case, this user called in, complaining that her session, specifically trying to use her Cisco soft phone inside of her VDI session, was really, really poor, was not able to get consistent audio, and particularly when they're recording these audio, if it's not good, they can't use it and they can't effectively perform their job. So they're on the phone with this home user, and what they were able to do is flip over to the Goliath platform and quickly identify the session, as well as confirm that this particular user was in fact having a poor session. What they were then able to do is isolate and find exactly what was causing that session to be poor. You know, there's a couple of questions that you typically would ask yourself when a user is experiencing poor session performance. So is it a resource issue? Is it a connection speed issue or something like that? They were able to narrow it down to bandwidth. And while on the phone with her, they were able to also identify that her connection speed was really, really low, particularly after 3 p.m., which was, really helpful for them because they asked her, hey, what's happening in your house at 3 p.m.? And then she replied, hey, my kids get back from school, as well as my husband gets back from work, and he's also on the Wi-Fi, and they're all, playing games or doing work on the internet connection, which then sort of dampened or pegged the connection and then caused her connection speed to be low. And they're able to see this in real time. So as they, asked her to get everyone else off the Wi-Fi network, they were able to see in real time that the connection speed went up, performance went back up, and prove that it was a bandwidth or connection speed issue at that user's location that was the root cause of the issues, as opposed to an iGel or Citrix or even VMware problem. So let's show you how they did that. So right now, what we are looking at is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display. And when customers like Penn National come to this screen, they're coming here to troubleshoot, either in their case where a user is calling in, complaining about a problem, or if the technology itself, based on a number of thresholds, has alerted them or alerted you that a particular user is having, let's say, sustained latency inside of a session, or a long log-on time, or anything that could actually impact that session. So when you come here, you're here to troubleshoot. And this screen is designed to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. So there's an element of personalization with these screens, so you can actually, move things around depending on what your style is of troubleshooting. You can identify sessions very quickly with this quick search or quick filter section here, where you can then, start to type things on the screen, and they automatically dynamically change based on what you actually type, so that you can effectively isolate the sessions that you're looking for, find them as quickly and as easily as possible, so that you can actually drill into a session and find exactly what the root cause is, just like in this Penn National use case. So what they did was they clicked on this particular user session. Now what they get is a pop-up of 8 tabs showing them all the information they need to troubleshoot this particular user's session really, really quickly, starting off with this first tab that you see here, which is the Summary tab. And this Summary tab pulls in together all of the infrastructure pieces and all of those core metrics that you need to come up with quick answers as to what's causing problems. So in this case, they didn't even have to go into some of the rest of the tabs. They were able to solve this issue just by looking at the Summary tab. And here's how they did that. So first of all, they were able to identify all of the components and the infrastructure pieces here at the top of the screen that actually impacted or contributed in the delivery of Citrix for this particular user. They knew that this user wasn't having logon issues, so they skipped this second section. But this third section, specifically in the ICA HGX column, they were able to easily find exactly what the root cause of that problem was. So here you can actually see there's round trip time. You can click on round trip time, and this is how they confirmed that this particular user was indeed having a poor session. The next thing they looked at was network latency, and they saw that network latency was the bottleneck in the poor round trip time, because network latency almost mirrored what round trip time was looking at. And then they were able to come to their conclusion with this bottom metric here, connection speed, the amount of bandwidth available for Citrix receiver at that user's endpoint. And they were able to see that right about 3 p.m. there was a dip in connection speed that correlated with a spike in network latency and a spike in round trip time. And what's really good is, because this is a live updating screen, as these as she was able to get everyone else off of the Wi-Fi, they were able to see in real time that the connection speed went back up, thus confirming that that particular issue has been resolved. So, what we've gone through is quickly how Penn National is able to troubleshoot issues with remote users, specifically, using their VDI session with a number of different tools outside of the network, and prove that issues were actually not from the Citrix or internal components, but actually from outside of the network at that user's location.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. So let's go into a second scenario, and you'll see there's some overlap, but we're going to show you how you can attack these problems in slightly different ways. So our second one is more about that proactive nature. And so we were working with a top 10 U.S. health system here in the United States. They have over 100 hospitals nationwide and millions of patients. They happen to use Citrix XenApp, VMware, and they're an Epic Hyperspace customer, although they do have some specific Cerner applications. Now, when they came to us, their clinical staff was complaining that there was a lot of issues around Citrix availability, and also that there were many times that it was so slow they couldn't launch their Epic application. And so this reached to a point where clinicians actually went to management and said, IT has to do something. We cannot care for our patients effectively because of this poor slowness. And IT said, management said, not only do I need you to fix these issues, I need you to make sure that they never occur again. You need to be able to predict when our clinicians log on that they're going to actually have access to the applications they need to care for their patients every day. And so they came to Goliath to really leverage our early warning system that would allow them to alert any type of performance issues, either within their virtualized desktop environment or within their Epic environment, to ensure that every time a clinician logged on, they were able to do their job. Well, it ends up that after they launched Goliath, they set up this early warning system and monitoring. They actually went ahead and upgraded their Epic Hyperspace. And the day of the upgrade, and they had tested it thoroughly, but the day of the upgrade, one of these early warning systems alerted them at 4:30 in the morning that Epic was down. And if it didn't get fixed, that morning when everyone came to log in, they would not have access. And that would have impacted about 25,000 users. So IT was able to quickly roll back the upgrade. They actually found that the issue was in the Citrix layer that all during testing never appeared, but as soon as they started to put actual end user load testing on, it became a problem. So they rolled it back, they fixed it, and was able to avoid those 25,000 users not having access to Epic. So as you can imagine, this early warning system not only saved downtime, but it also saved face for IT. It showed them that they had listened to management and addressed the issue, but most importantly, they didn't have a failed upgrade project. They were able to then roll it back and successfully launch it, and no one was the wiser that there would have been an issue. So Yemi, why don't you talk through, one, how this was actually deployed at this health system, because I think that's important to understand how these early warning systems deployed, and then show what that alert would actually present and what information someone could take action upon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stacey. So right now what we're looking at is an actual customer deployment of this early warning system. This Epic hospital has different hospital locations and then a central data center where they're hosting the Epic application as well as those VDIs and other infrastructure components. So what they were able to do with the Goliath solution, particularly this early warning system, was they were able to deploy a lightweight piece of technology at each one of those different hospital locations. And what's actually taking place is on a regular or scheduled basis, the application or this software is launching the Epic application, going through the same process that the end user would go through, going through the NetScaler or storefront page, accessing and making sure that authentication works, making sure that there's a successful presentation of applications and resources, and then making sure that those resources actually enumerate and actually function correctly. And if there's an error on any step of the way, they're now able to get a real-time alert. So in this case, they got an alert at 4:30 in the morning after a maintenance window saying that an application was not able or was not enumerating and was not presenting at that moment in time, meaning that users, when they come in to start their workday, would not actually have access to those applications. So here's where they went to inside of the technology to actually take a closer look at this. And we'll talk a little bit about how that presented for them and how they were able to leverage this to solve those issues. So what we're looking at here is the application availability analysis tab. And typically customers get to the screen when they've gotten an alert saying that a particular application launch was failed or it had a long launch time or something like that. And what this screen gave this particular customer is, number one, you have in this top section of the screen a live dashboard showing you all of the launches taking place across the environment from all of those different locations. And you can see here the blue bars represent average launch time, and the trend line represents overall availability across the board. Now, so out of 100%, how available are the applications and desktops that you're launching? So when they got to the screen, they saw that there were about 0% availability at a particular time, which obviously in a patient-critical healthcare environment, that is very, very detrimental. So what they were able to do is look here at the bottom section where they're able to analyze each individual launch taking place across the environment. They were able to see the date and time of the launch. Here's where they would see the Epic Hyperspace applications that were being launched. On the third column, they're able to see where it was being launched from, and then ultimately if the launch was successful or if it failed. And if it did fail, you can actually see, or they were able to see exactly where it failed. So that's one way. So you get the alert, and then they wanted to see exactly what was actually taking place. So what they did is you can click here on this magnifying glass icon, and now what you get is deep information, or specifically screenshots of each step of the process. And how this is helpful is here, when they got to a particular failure point, they were able to see that it failed at the enumeration stage, first of all, meaning that the application, in this case the Epic application, was not enumerating for the on the storefront page for those users. Now, they were able to see that other applications were enumerating, so they were able to at least get an understanding that it wasn't a SQL issue, it wasn't something with the storefront page being down completely, it just looks like a configuration issue. So they were able to fix this very, very quickly and avoid all of these users from, experiencing this sort of failures when they started up or came in to start their workday.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. And one thing I want to point out here is, many of these environments you've seen have both a mix of VMware and Citrix. It happens that a couple of these are more Citrix-centric. Everything that Yemi has shown to date and will show is available within the VMware infrastructure. So I do want to point that out as well. Now for our final scenario, this is an upgrade scenario. So we were working with a large global law firm. They had offices around the globe with about 1,000 users. They were using Citrix Zen Desktop, Zen App. They had part of their infrastructure within AWS, and they also had some virtual servers from VMware. Now, this is about a year ago or so, they came to us upgrading from Citrix 6.5 to Citrix 7.9. I'm sure many of you are either in the middle of an upgrade, maybe you're past the upgrade, but especially if you're on some of the shorter term branches of Citrix, you're constantly upgrading. So I think this scenario plays out for a lot of you that are running these different applications. But what they came to us with were two challenges, similar to the first one or second one we just went over. The first was their remote users were experiencing logon times of over 2 minutes in their remote offices. And this had been escalated to management, and management told IT, not only do you need to reduce that time, but when you upgrade, we expect to get a performance improvement. So as I talked about earlier, a lot of times upgrades bring this false expectation that performance will magically get better. Luckily, the IT team here recognized that they had to address the logon issue before they could even address the upgrade issue and making sure that it was better. So Yemi, can you talk about first how this organization was able to troubleshoot these long duration times and how they were able to resolve that? And then maybe talk a little bit about some of the advantages we have for that upgrade or migration scenario, enabling people to see actual applications in a single window for both instances, as well as some of the automatic intelligence we have to really help them in that upgrade.
Absolutely. So starting off talking about this particular customer's troubleshooting steps, and if you remember in the first scenario, it's very, very similar. You're able to first of all, head over to the session display where you can effectively start doing session by session troubleshooting. Identify the affected sessions, in this case, all of those sessions that had high logon times. Drill down into the session and find exactly what is actually impacting that particular user's logon from the depth of detail, each of the 33 plus stages of the process, so that you can exactly pinpoint root cause in a very quick and easy fashion. In this case, they were able to isolate that most of the additional times in the logon were in the authentication stage. And drilling closer into that, in the same view, they were able to identify that they were using the wrong domain controller to authenticate. So everything that impacted or that would have impacted authentication was just taking longer than usual because it had to traverse the network. This was a quick fix, of course, just reconfigured the authentication process with the correct domain controllers, and that was able to solve this issue that they were having with logon times across the board. So let's show you how they did that. So right now we're back at the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. And again, just to reiterate, this is where you go. This is where these customers go to troubleshoot issues when it comes to a user calling in, or once they've gotten alerts that particular users are having issues across the board when it comes to session slowness or logon times, like in this particular example. And again, they're able to quickly isolate those sessions that they're looking for. Keep in mind, and one thing that came in very handy for this particular customer is the fact that this not only shows your current sessions, but also historic sessions. So you can go back in time and see what exactly has changed in a particular user's session that is causing them to have issues now and not have issues 2 weeks ago or a month ago or maybe even 2 months ago. This is very important because this then not only drives the historical reporting engine that we have, but also gives you the ability to retroactively see what has changed so that you can resolve these issues as quickly as possible. So in this case, they isolated one of those sessions that was having those logon times. They clicked on the sessions, and again, they're able to see a pop-up of about 8 tabs, that gives them all the information they need to troubleshoot. Now, they weren't having issues with connection, or weren't having issues with, overall, session performance. It was focused mostly on the logon time. So they clicked on this logon summary tab, and it took them directly to the logon tab where now they have all the information they need to troubleshoot this particular user's logon. So going through, I know there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to take some time and just talk about what these metrics are and how they're being used on a daily basis by our customers. So the first section of this page tells you what's going on during the brokering stages of the logon process. So here you're able to see things like what's going on at the delivery controller, things like authentication, drive mapping, printer mapping, things like logon scripts, and how those are impacting the logon for that particular user. You're also able to see what's going on at Citrix receiver, and this is without deploying any technology to that user's endpoint. You're able to see how long ICA file download took, or how long it took to establish a micro VPN connection. Effectively, what you're getting is the ability to pinpoint any Citrix receiver related issues that are impacting any particular user session. Now, the bottom section, this gives you insight into each stage of the process. So you're able to see brokering and client validation and authentication and group policies. So sticking with authentication, because this is exactly what was impacting this user session, they were able to see that most of the logon times were taking place during the authentication stage. And on expanding that particular section, they were able to identify, okay, LDAP calls are taking very long. Accessing those files for the user's profile are taking very long as well. Why is that? And they were able to identify the domain controller name, and they were able to point to, wait, that's the wrong domain controller. That's one that is specific to one particular hospital location or one particular office location, and not actually set up for the entire domain. So they switched that, they were able to fix that, and pinpoint. And once they were able to fix that, they were able to see that every session afterwards was the logon time was shorter, obviously, than what they had before. So they were able to confirm that actually solved those issues. Now, Stacy mentioned the ability to really understand the upgrade process, and with the Goliath solution, we have a number of different views and that are leveraging the embedded intelligence and automation to be able to show you exactly the health of your upgrade, the health of your platforms, and show you exactly what's taking place so that you can actually solve those problems. So where I'm going to flip to now is another place that this law firm went to, which was the automatic discovery and dependency map. And this, as the name implies, will automatically map out the entire delivery infrastructure, showing you how components are connected to each other, where issues are taking place, and how it's able to show you exactly where issues are taking place is because of the embedded intelligence and specifically the monitoring rules that we apply to your environment. So we're monitoring for different thresholds, conditions, and failure points that, if not taken care of, could actually cause issues. So this law firm was able to flip back and forth between their old environment and their new environment. They were able to see the health of their environments and pinpoint exactly what components needed, let's say, more resources, or what components had issues, critical issues taking place, so that they can resolve them and ultimately deliver a better experience through the upgrade process. So with that, what we're going to do is now talk about some of the historical reports and how our customers use this in their environment while going through and after the fact of being able to troubleshoot issues, but to bridge the gap between what end users are experiencing as well as what management wants to see. So the first report here that I have on the screen, we have over 65 reports that come with the technology, and I'm just going to go through a number of them here that are sort of the most common ones. So this first one is the license usage report, and this actually was used heavily by that law firm because they wanted to be able to identify problem times and areas where there's going to be where there are a lot of users, so that they can allocate resources accordingly. So this this license usage report shows them and shows management exactly what times of the day that they have many users online, or where they are at with the overall Citrix license usage. Some people like to play it really, really close, and others like to have many licenses available. So this just gives them a baseline, gives them an understanding of, number one, usage and performance in the environment, as well as overall license usage, so that they can sort of keep up to date with that. The next one was used heavily by that law firm as well, log-on duration report. And this specifically slices out log-on duration based on the stage of the log-on process. So you can see across the board how GPO times are, or overall session startup times, or client and brokering validation. So you can start to identify what sections of the logons are actually impacting users across the board, so that you can justify any projects or upgrades that can help increase performance across the board. So that's one that's very text heavy. This is another one for log-on duration that is more graphically pleasing, and it shows you sort of log-on times based on stage, as well as overall session count per hour and per day, again showing you exactly how the performance is in your environment, and how the user counts and things like that take place across the environment.
Great, thanks, Yemi. And as we finish up here, there's a few questions that have come in, but if you have additional questions, please put them in the Q&A section. And just what I want to wrap up here is Yemi walked through 3 specific troubleshooting scenarios. If you go to our website under our blog, you will see where we have numerous other user stories, as well as troubleshooting scenarios, where we have helped hundreds of customers across the globe, variety of industries, both in the enterprise as well as healthcare, really helping them to better anticipate, troubleshoot, and prevent performance issues within their hybrid IT environments. So please check that out, and you can surely find some of the scenarios that I bet are facing your organization today if we haven't covered them on this webinar. So with that, I have Colin, who's here in the background and been helping us man the webinar. Colin, do you want to go through some of the questions that have come in?
Sure. I want to thank Stacy and Yemi for all their help today and all their great information. So some of the questions we have coming in the meantime, if anything rings a bell, please feel free to enter in the chat, as Stacy said. The first question, can I tell what applications a user is running in a session?
Absolutely. The amount of information that we get when it comes to this session, and I know we didn't go through the full session display and the session drill down, but we're able to tell effectively what is the user doing inside of their session. Are they streaming audio? Are they watching a movie? Or are they doing something graphically intensive that's causing issues in the environment? So all of that information is available in the session drill down, and a lot of our customers leverage this, especially customers delivering desktops, full desktops. They leverage this on a daily basis to at least point to user behavior as being the root cause of performance issues in the environment.
Thank you. The next question we have is, can you preemptively alert on the ICA HDX channels?
Absolutely. And that's actually how a number of our customers, like the law firm, as well as Penn National, use the technology because they're able to, first of all, get alerts before users start calling in about performance issues, so that when they do call in, they're able to tell the user, yes, we are aware that you are having some sustained latency, and we are on top of it. Really, adds credibility to the IT department because they are already aware of these issues before users start to call in.
Great, thank you. The next question, are there any retention limits on the data we collect?
That's a good question. We do not average roll up any information that we collect, and we give you the ability to determine how long you want to keep the data for. So there are no retention limits. So if you wanted to keep it for, let's say, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, maybe even a year, it's really up to you. So you can determine how long you keep the data for, and we ultimately also help you size the database correctly so that you can retain all of that information.
Great, thank you, Yemi. So one more question just came in, asking if you could further show the session drill down.
Yeah, let's flip back into that right now. So right now we're looking at a particular user session, and we talked a little bit about the summary tab that shows you sort of those key metrics that are taking place, or the key metrics for this particular user session. We talked a little bit about the log on duration section. I'm going to flip over to the ICA-HCX channel tab, and this goes back to that question earlier where you're able to identify what the user is doing inside of their session. So if you look here at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, we're able to break out each one of those different channels of the ICA protocol and how it's being used inside of the session. So I'm going to expand this section, and you can see, thin wire bandwidth, which is the Citrix display adapter, showing that this user was doing something graphically intensive. You can also see things like audio input and output bandwidth, which is heavily used by Penn National when able to identify if maybe it's a Cisco soft phone session that's impacting that user session performance and not the Citrix side and things like that. You can also take a look at the session host itself, being able to see resource utilization across the board, being able to identify any metrics that could be adding issues or adding times to the response time for this particular user. You can see the hypervisor layer as well, so you can identify for the time frame of the user session what exactly is impacting, how the hypervisor is impacting that session. You can also see any other virtual machines that are being supported by that hypervisor host, so you can identify if that hypervisor host is having issues across the board. In the Processes tab, you're able to see all of the processes that are running on that session host. You can also filter based on resource utilization, and you have this nice little chart showing you the trends for each one of those processes. And in the VDI session, you will be able to see those applications as well. And then finally, in the alerts and logs section, here you're able to see, again, talking about the embedded intelligence and automation of the technology, you're able to see any alerts that have bubbled up based on the monitoring rules that we automatically apply to your environment. So you can see all of the alerts that are triggering on that session host for the time frame of that user session, so you can point to issues with a particular process running hot, or group policy failures, or anything else like that that could actually impact performance for this user. And you also get the event log section. Here's where we will automatically pull in any application or system error or warning events that take place during this user session as well. So you now have in one screen, in one single view, you're able to troubleshoot everything from the connection down to the hypervisor layer, Windows perfmon, and event log. So you have all the information you need to effectively troubleshoot any particular user session.
Thanks for driving deeper into that, Yemi. Looks like we have time for one final question, and it will be, is there a client agent install required?
Yeah, so we do collect information a number of ways. The first way is through our lightweight intelligent agent that you would deploy to your infrastructure, your Citrix infrastructure components, so your delivery controllers, your storefront servers, as well as your VDAs, or those machines that are hosting sessions in your environment. We also collect information, or we collect data through some agentless methods as well. So specifically, integration into your hypervisor platform is agentless through the VMware APIs or the Citrix APIs, as well as integration into Citrix itself through the API. So a number of different ways we collect all of this information so you can get sort of all the information you need to effectively troubleshoot.
Great. Thank you again to Yemi and Stacy. And if you have any further questions, feel free to send them in, and somebody will be in touch with you shortly. Thank you.